Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Commerce Today. I am Joshua Warren, CEO of Creativity, an e-commerce agency, and author of E-commerce Growth Playbook. Please continue buying the book on Amazon and leaving reviews and sending me your feedback. I greatly appreciate it. We've been on a bit of a tear here the last few weeks. I started off talking about tariffs, then about PCI compliance. Now we are diving into sales tax. And just like PCI compliance and tariffs, not talking about this just because it's fun and exciting, talking about it because there's been some big changes in 2025 that I have found a lot of the merchants I work with completely are not aware of. You may recall back in 2018, there was the South Dakota versus Wayfair lawsuit and decision that basically opened up the door to where e-commerce merchants started having to collect and pay sales tax pretty much nationwide. This was all tied into a concept called an economic nexus. So basically, if you have a warehouse or a store or an employee, or in some cases, some states, even an affiliate in a given state, then that state will say, hey, you have an economic nexus here. That means you have to collect sales tax. Now, the nice thing is most states put some limits to it and said, hey, we don't want the smallest e-commerce sellers out there having to file sales tax reports in all 50 states. They would use a gross sales and transaction threshold. So for instance, some states would say, okay, if you sell $100,000 or 200 transactions in a year in our state, then you have to collect sales tax, pay it back to the state, and report on it. If you are under both of those numbers, then you don't have to. What was happening though is there were a lot of companies out there, a lot of smaller sellers that if you're selling $210 items, so you've only sold $2,000 into that state, that's not very much sales tax revenue for them, but you're still having to file a report. You're still having to collect the tax. You're still having to pay the tax. Both Alaska and Utah have removed their transaction thresholds. So in Alaska's case, they had that 200 transaction or $100,000 threshold. Now it's just $100,000. So it doesn't matter how many things you sell in Alaska, how many orders are placed there each year. All that matters is if you have sold more than $100,000 into that state. So that actually can reduce the number of states you need to file sales tax returns with, save you some money. It means you're not having to charge sales tax in those states. So you're saving your customers some money. All around, really a good thing, but it does require that you monitor your gross sales more carefully. There are definitely services and software providers out there that can do this for you. A lot of e-commerce platforms have reports built in as well that can do this. If you're not sure, if you don't have a great setup for this yet, or maybe your sales tax software is getting more and more expensive and you're looking at alternatives, definitely reach out to me. You can find me on LinkedIn as Joshua Warren with a Creativity Gold background behind my headshot. You can schedule a free 30-minute e-commerce consult with me, or just drop me a DM, and I'm more than happy to introduce you to a few options for sales tax management. Now, so the Nexus states have changed, or the requirements have changed. So chances are, especially if you're a smaller to a mid-sized merchant, and if you're not selling a lot into Alaska, which a lot of us probably aren't, then your Nexus states probably have changed. So you need to do an inventory this year of your Nexus states. So what states are you currently collecting sales tax for, and compare your gross sales against their thresholds. I also found that there's a lot of companies out there that either have a CPA or a CFO that are very conservative, and after that Wayfair court decision basically said, we're just going to collect sales tax in every state. You don't have to do that. You only have to do that if you meet their thresholds. So it could be worth going through and just double checking if you're collecting for every state and filing reports for every state or not. Also, make sure you set alerts for approaching thresholds. You can use your accounting software for this. You can use your e-commerce software for this, but make sure if you start to approach those thresholds, you're alerted and aware. Also, something that I found a lot of brands don't think to do is consider deregistering. So if you drop below a state's new threshold, you can actually work with your CPA and deregister or withdraw your registration to save on returns, filings, and fees with that states. Also, fun part about taxes, they never go down, do they? So a few states have actually raised their base sales tax rates in 2025. Louisiana decided that they wanted to take the lead as the highest sales tax in the United States. So when you combine their state tax, which they raised from 4.45% to 5%, with the local sales tax, they now have the highest sales tax in the US. California has adjusted its unified rate to 7.25%, and there's been a few other states and obviously a whole lot of local municipalities that have changed their sales tax rates. So these increases can erode your margins. The state doesn't care if you forgot to update the rate on your website and you did not charge enough sales tax. They are still going to require you to pay the correct amount of sales tax. So this is one of those little things where your profit can leak out of your e-commerce business if you're not staying on top of this. Also, there's been a big shift. A lot of states have decided that they want to tax digital products. So audiobooks, apps, video games, streaming services. One of the interesting things I was reading about is a lot of downloadable products. So if you have, I am thinking about back to school, if you have downloadable worksheets that you are selling online, those now in a lot of states are taxable. You have to stay on top of not only the changes in tax rates, but the changes in what is and isn't taxable. Again, you can do this completely manually. Every major e-commerce platform out there has a way that you can do this manually and not use a third-party service. However, especially if you're a direct-to-consumer business selling into a lot of different states, I would highly recommend that instead you use one of the many SaaS platforms or software products that are designed for ensuring you're charging and collecting the right sales tax rate, and most of those can even do your reporting and file your payments for you. So what do you need to do for these sales tax changes? First up, review your product catalog, identify which items might now be taxable that weren't before, especially look at digital goods. Also realize that now these products may be taxable in certain states. So if your setup currently only allows you to say something is or isn't taxable, you may need to modify that so you can set it by state. Also make sure that your tax rates have been updated in your checkout system. Make sure you have those new state rates for Louisiana and California, as well as the changes in the local rates. Also, you may want to communicate these price changes, especially if you're a business based in Louisiana or California, selling primarily to people in those states. Chances are they know because they felt the increase in their pocketbook and on their credit card statements, but communicating so they understand you haven't raised your prices, sales tax has gone up. Now, we talked about packaging and the new packaging laws and how California is going to start charging you based on if you're using non-recyclable, non-reusable packaging. Two states, and not California, it was actually Colorado and Minnesota, have taken it a step further with yet another fee that's going to impact e-commerce businesses. These are retail delivery fees. These are a levy like a tax, but they are not a sales tax. They actually apply specifically to the delivery of tangible goods. So basically, Colorado and Minnesota now require merchants to add a small amount to the invoice that is charged to the customer when shipping within those states. The fee is per order, not per item. It is tied to the delivery. Many other states are considering similar fees. While they are very minor fees for now, they're starting small, they do add complexity and they can confuse customers. I think services like Uber have done us a disservice here because especially early on, Uber was really bad about, they just had that line item of taxes and fees and other charges, and they would lump everything into that, including their pretty high service fee that wasn't actually a tax. So lots of times customers will see either a new fee pop up on their invoice or they will see a line item that bundles these fees together, and they will assume that it is you, the merchant, collecting that fee and benefiting from that fee and not realize that it is something that their wonderful state has done. So it's important to display these well. Also, make sure that whatever software you're using, if you are using one of those SaaS services for sales tax, talk to them and ask them, hey, are you going to support retail delivery fees? Is that something your platform is going to provide for me? Or am I going to have to look for another solution? Because this is an area where you may actually end up wanting to move some sales tax automation providers so that you have one solution to cover sales tax and the retail delivery fees. And again, lots of other states like those packaging fees, like the privacy laws, like a lot of things we've been talking about. Other states are now looking at these retail delivery fees. A lot of this is due to, first of all, seeing a new revenue opportunity for the government, but then also seeing the impact that the shift from buying in person to buying online and having it delivered has had. Obviously, it's not as big as back in 2020 and 2021, but a lot of municipalities are looking around and saying, wow, we have all these UPS trucks. We have all these Amazon trucks. We have all these delivery trucks driving on our roads. And basically, whether it's pollution, whether it's wear and tear on the roads, whether it's traffic, they want to charge a fee to kind of compensate for that. So make sure if you are shipping to Colorado or Minnesota, you have updated your checkout to calculate and display the delivery fee for those shipments. Make sure you add a tooltip or a fact section that explains what this fee is. That transparency can really build trust. Also, make sure you are monitoring legislative updates. Hopefully, if you have a sales tax automation service, they have an email newsletter, a blog, some way they're keeping you up to date. It's not super exciting, but you can actually follow the individual state taxing authorities. I would highly recommend at least following your own state's taxing authority for updates. So, important to know those Nexus thresholds have changed. In many cases, for smaller businesses, this is a change in your favor where you may not have to collect sales tax where you were before. Rates have gone up, digital goods are being taxed, and we have a fun new retail delivery fee to deal with. So make sure you're staying on top of these changes. Again, this is an area where you can accidentally leak a lot of your profit margin if you're not paying attention. Also, you don't want to get audited by these wonderful taxing authorities. As always, I am not an accountant. I am not a lawyer, not a CPA. I don't even own a sales tax automation software platform. So please talk to someone that does fall into one of those categories if you have a specific question about your business. However, I am also more than happy to have a free consultation with you to make a referral. You can kind of share with me what you're looking for, and I can connect you with someone that can help you out more specifically around sales tax. All right, next week we are talking about one other group that is coming for your profit margins, and that is the United States Postal Service. So stay tuned for an important update on, especially if you're offering free shipping going into the holiday season. Thanks, and I will see you next week for another episode of Commerce Today.